Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another edition of SuperCoach Edge, and of course another entry for Damo's Team Talk, this time coming out of round 17. And it was a round, I guess, underlined with a little bit of havoc across the board. Obviously started with the good old Fishman, the fishing charter. He was marooned at the docks for a week, unfortunately, with a lot of people either deciding to trade him out or alternatively run I guess a bench option to cover for him for the week. It really came down to whether or not you had ample cover. A lot of people had either Dowling or Revel as a bit of cover, rookie cover that is, of course, or if they were able to swing a 23rd man into the forward line via a Caldwell potentially, or alternatively, there were some people that did the almost straight swap from Fisher to Caldwell, of course, which is what we'll get into. We'll discuss all those moves, everything else, what we did, of course. But, of course, if you are tuning in for the first time, any support you can provide us is obviously much appreciated. So if you can give us a like, give us a sub, that would be absolutely fantastic. So without further ado, boo-boo, let's have a look at how we scored for round 17. And there we go. Ended up scoring a 2,403, which must admit kind of surprised me. Looking at my team progressively through the round, it was one of those things where I just went from, I guess, ordinary to bad to worse. And I was totally expecting to score 2,300 or below, especially considering there's a couple of things which I'll show with my team. But the captaincy side of things, like going into the round, Liam and I spoke about it in our weekly episode, and we outlined probably 4 or 5 different guys that we're pretty confident in punching out some fairly decent scores. So across the board, we were hoping and expecting some nice scores, but as it turned out, there were maybe 2, maybe 3 players among those popular selections that actually scored well, and the rest kind of went teetering around that 100 mark or even below in some cases. So as you can see there, 2,403 if you're watching us on YouTube, of course, and season rank 2,485. So believe it or not, I actually went up 129 spots. But having said all that, it kind of masks a little bit of an issue with my team, which I'll show you now. Before I do that, actually, my team value has actually gone up to potentially the highest peak that it's had across the season, 14,123,900. Ended up having 9 out of 12 league wins, which is obviously always a good thing. But you'll notice there, trades remaining 2. So this time last week, I was explaining and running through a different, permutations of what I could do. And one of those options is bringing in Rankine. So, of course, I probably should, before going through line by line, I will summarize what I did, because I didn't really definitively make any decision around trades last week. And I think I was kind of in the camp of I'll leave things as they are and at least for a week, assess things how they go. And if my team improves, I will keep things as they are or potentially look to make some moves. And I was stewing over a few days, and come team sheets on Thursday night, for those of you that tuned in to the live stream on YouTube, of course, if you haven't, feel free to tune in every Thursday. Around about 6 o'clock, roughly, we end up doing the live stream where you can obviously jump on, have a chat, so on and so forth. But for those people that jumped on there, they would have seen me do a bit of a backflip and just chatting through different options and stuff. And it was actually one of, I forget the name of the viewer who was in the live chat, but was talking about McKerch. And I was a big fan of McKerch at his price point, and looking at his 2 games in the VFL leading into obviously him making his return this round. He ended up having, I think it was over 30 disposals, 2 goals for one of the games. The other game was around about 29 disposals, a bulk of marks. And I was like, he's in some good form. He's at full fitness. It looks like he played full game across both of those games in the VFL. So I was like, you know what? Back him in. And that was kind of my first sort of bright idea, I guess you could say. And that was going to come at the expense, that move initially, of Touk Miller. I was deciding between Touk Miller, the running man, and Jackie Steele. And both of the guys very, very similar in price point, very similar in terms of average. In terms of ceiling scores and the floor scores, it looked as though Miller bar maybe the one game where he was tagged, I think when he was actually playing St Kilda potentially, he scored that 50, 60 odd score. But apart from that, he was averaging a really high floor of around about 90 odd, whereas compared to Steele, he had a couple more games where he was averaging, he scored in the 60s or 70s. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to backflip here, and I'm going to keep Miller instead of Steele. So I moved Steele on, which ended up turning out to be a fairly decent move because I think Steele ended up scoring around about just over 100. McKerch scored 134 in the end. And what that did was it made McKerch that, I guess, more genuine M9 option. Just as it was looking like Rosie was coming into some good form, and as we saw on the weekend with that 168, kind of justified that move. So McKerch was going to be my my M9 swing with the defense because, of course, McKerch is a defender midfielder, and it allowed me to really swing with Martin if need be, or Dacos as well for the remainder of the season, just because I didn't have that DPP link. So a couple of upsides there, and that was part of the reason why I pulled the trigger. And then it came down to, I guess, with that spare cash, what it allowed me to do was, I think it was around about 150k, the difference between McKerch and Steele, which will obviously be much, much less in comparison this week if you were going to make that move, which you could still do. But I'm looking to, I guess, in this case here, I was looking to use the cash to put on the head of Fisher and take a little bit of a risk by bringing in Rankine. A calculated risk, or, so what I thought, because Rankine I saw as a genuine F4 type operator for the remainder of the season. And it allowed me to have 72.1k in the bank left over for my remaining 2 trades. So I guess all in all, I was trying to be proactive, make moves, and I guess generate my own sort of luck in moving up the ranks. So I guess on the surface, it looks good. But of course, Tookie Miller, who I ended up keeping over Steele, ended up going down with a wrist injury, got subbed on 33. So that in itself hurt. And then the other link to my other trade, obviously with Fisher going to Rankine, is Rankine will most likely get himself rubbed out because he ended up concussing Starcevic with a front-on hit, even though it was accidental, of course. I think they headbutted each other. But as we know, like any head-high hit where even if it's accidental and your opponent goes off concussed, you're pretty much done. So both of those trades, yes, it helped me with Steele to McKerch, but by extension, not trading out Miller over Steele for McKerch, that hurt. And then again, the other trade with Fisher to Rankine. So I know it helped me with, I guess, more points. On the board, I got an extra, 30-odd points by going Steele and McKerch, but if I was to play a Steele or a Green in this case, because I ended up having to bench Green in order to loop on McKerch's score, I would have had Green's 96 because I probably would have played him, had a bit more confidence in playing him over Steele. I would have benched Steele, and it would have been a difference of Tom Green's score of 96 compared to Miller's 33. So what's that? An extra 63 points difference there. And then, of course, Fisher to Rankine. So obviously Rankine, he started pretty poorly, came home like a freight train and scored 97. So that was good. Otherwise, I probably would have rolled the dice if I kept Fisher and played Revel, which Revel only punched out a score of 36. So that's a difference of, 61 points. So I guess it's quite the same if I was to only go for McKerch and not trade Fisher to Rankine. If I was to trade a Tookie Miller to McKerch and played Tom Green. But it's just funny, isn't it? The way it works out that both of the moves that I've made via the trades, I guess the non-move in the case of not moving on Tookie Miller, is it's hurt me long term. Yes, I've scored well enough for this round, but I'm down to 2 trades. Took Miller, I don't know how long he's going to be out for, if any weeks. I'm knocking on wood. I'm praying to the SuperCoach gods for mercy because, I don't know what that looks like. It could be a 6-week injury. It could be out for the rest of the season. Who knows? And then when it comes to Rankine, we don't know what he's going to get. I am confident that he's going to get weeks just because, how serious the AFL are taking these bumps which are resulting in concussions. And I'm hoping for at least 1 to 2 weeks, hopeful at minimum. or at least maximum rather in this case, because I own him. And I don't really want him to be out for any more than that. I guess running the numbers, like we've got 7 rounds to go in the season. And if Rankine's out for 4+, that's already over half of the remaining season that he's going to be out for. So that would be virtually a trade straight up. And then if Tookie Miller's out as well, it may mean that I'm using both of my remaining trades in the 1 week. So yeah, it probably would have been more worthwhile taking the hit, not getting McKerch heading into the round just gone, and keeping Steele, keeping Fisher, taking the hit by playing Revel in Fisher's spot, and then having 4 trades up my sleeve where, yes, I could use 2 trades, but then be down to 2 trades and be virtually in the same position that I am now. But having still Steele in my team, which is fine. Having Fisher in my team, which is fine. I guess the main reason why I moved on Fisher is partly due to the McKerch return. I do think that North Melbourne, considering McKerch's injury, the hotspot that he had in his foot, I do think they're going to keep him down in defence. I know they ran him through the middle, various stages in the rounds leading up to his injury. But I just think they're going to play him in defence, bruise-free footy, protect the youngster at all costs, and just allow him to get his hands on the footy like he did on the weekend and score those easy points, kick-ins galore, all that sort of stuff. And I think, conversely, Fisher's going to be taking a hit off that. I think it's going to impact him, but I just don't know as to what degree it's going to impact him. We'll just have to wait and see. But with Sheasel back there as well, various stages, I just think all 3 of those guys, I know they've played together, various stages through the season, but I just think of those 3 guys, the one that you want to drop, you're not going to move McKerch, as I said, because you don't want to expose him to hits and knocks and stuff in the engine room. So I do think of those 3, 100% McKerch is going to stay in defence. Sheasel will, I think, continue getting runs through the middle where he can. And Fisher as well, I reckon he may play higher up the ground potentially, more as a sort of a third link in the chain where the ball's coming out of defence, and may take a hit in terms of not having as many kick-ins, where I think McKerch, which he displayed on the weekend, is an incredible player when it comes to his foot skills. And not only kick-ins, but like he'd kick into the first chain, and then he'd be the actual second chain in that link where they'd kick to him as he runs through and then kicks it long down the ground, very much in a similar mold to, the Seagull, Luke Ryan. So that, I guess, in a nutshell, was part of the reason why I first and foremost got rid of Fisher. And, trying to anti-pod him, I guess, in this sense, just because he's so highly owned. And then with McKerch being a relative pod, bringing in him, and then, it was hopeful that Miller was able to maintain his high-scoring floor at the very least, just to get me by. But as we know, and as I've just spoken about, Tookie Miller's been injured, and Rankine's potentially going to be out for a week or quite a few. So I'm praying for mercy at this stage. But yeah, it just goes to show that sometimes you've really got to keep your powder dry, and other times, when you're trying to be proactive and trying to make moves to move up the ranks, to really differentiate your team from the rest in order to make a bit of leeway in the ranks, sometimes it just doesn't fall in your favour. And in this case, both of the trades, they delivered me some pretty bad luck. Longer term, short term, it helped me with McKerch's score, yes, but I'd much prefer to have an extra, couple of trades up my sleeve heading into next week, where it may be the case where I'm potentially using one, if not both, of my last 2 trades. So with that said and done, let's roll through our line-by-line episode quickly. So McKerch, 141, he was just incredible alongside McKerch, and running through the middle and everything else that he does, pushes up the ground, really helped deliver that win for North, their first of the season, so congrats to them, and to North Melbourne supporters as well. I know what it feels like being a Carlton man, of course, going through decades of that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's always a great feeling to get your first win on the board and get the monkey off the back, and you're not going to go undefeated. You're not going to go winless for the season. So tip of the cap to you, North fans, and to Sheasel for his nice score. Nicky Dacos 92. He was one such VC option that I was looking at. I thought, chatting with Liam as well, he provided some really good insight into, and he spoke about it briefly on the weekly podcast as well, vodcast on YouTube as well, where Durham may have been a bit of a run with, and he did end up having that role. Shield at various stages, other players as well, they were just paying him attention, and you could tell visibly he was frustrated. Like, he was kicking for goal late in the fourth quarter, Dacos, and the broadcast had a close-up of him, and he was virtually just talking to himself and reading his lips. He was like, come on, Nick, don't fuck this up. Like, he was in his head, he was doubting himself, all that sort of stuff. So it'd be interesting to see if any coaches observe that and likewise, try and put a little bit more time into Dacos, even if it's not a complete shutdown role, but just putting a bit of physicality into him, putting a bit of time and effort into covering him to some extent. But as we've seen across the journey, opposition coaches just don't really care, even though it's shown time and again that Dacos can be vulnerable. But 92, by those standards, not too bad from old Nicky. Lukey Ryan, the Seagull, 99, yeah, thereabouts. Nothing to really write home about compared to what he has been scoring in recent weeks. Houston again, he has probably been my worst trade-in. I got him in the week that Stewart was on his bye, and it's absolutely gone to tatters because even though the first week I had him, he delivered that 174. Ever since then, 102, 59, and 76, just putrid. Comparing it to Stewart, who obviously was the man that I traded out for Stewart, is 106.3. For Houston, 79. Even when you extrapolate that out to 5-round average, and I think that'll include Houston's big 170 odd score that I got first up, he's averaging 101.8, Stewart 94.2. So I guess longer term, it's still in my favour, but once you look at the 3-round average, you can just see there the recent form is bad for Houston, and it was part of the reason why I was hesitant to bring him in. And I spoke about it that week that I was bringing him in. I was like, well, he does have a knack for having a very, very shaky floor, and those floor scores just aren't good enough. And we've seen there in recent weeks, he's just been pretty shit, even when he's had favourable matchups against St Kilda and the like. So don't like him at all, but I'm going to have to stick with him, unfortunately. Wayne Miller at 111 looked really good, really, really good. To his credit, he played very well against Sydney, a really good opponent. And yeah, he's actually been a decent trade-in that I've had, since I think I brought him in around about round 5 maybe. A couple of low scores, but ever since then he's had like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tons, and 4 of those were 110 plus. 6, including round 17 just gone. So he's been really good. Really, really good. So happy with that. Nick Martin, 99. I think he ended up getting scaled down potentially from memory come the end of the game. But is what it is with Nicky Martin. Bont, he was my VC of 106, and I thought Sarong, like that matchup, Sarong for me was always my number one captaincy option against Richmond, who he's dominated in previous games, who is playing at Optus Stadium on his home deck, where he's been averaging 131 points per game. I was like, that's a tick, tick, tick. Like, get him in, put the captaincy on him. Was confident that he was going to eclipse Bond's score easily. And as it turned out, Richmond, who never tag, suddenly tag with Graham that was doing a run with roll with Sarong. So that really was a massive kick in the anus. Zach Butters, 159. He was just absolutely elite. Incredible stuff by Butters. Likewise, Rosie as well, 168. Like both of these guys. And just on Rosie, he would have to be the biggest bargain of the season. Like hands down. I don't care what happens from here on out. Like what he's delivered for me since I've brought him in is just absolutely next level. Which was round 15 I brought him in. 111, 103 and a 168. So he's already gone up, 84K in that time that I've had him. So he's been absolutely incredible value for his output. And as I said, that's part of the reason why I've now opted to shift him on field, even though he was my initial M9. I was like, you know what? I have confidence now that he's got his form back. He's got his mojo. I can play him on field, and I'll bring in McKerch, who's going to be my M9 swing between mid and defence. So both of those boys, Butters and Rosie, looked really good. Merritt, 145. I was considering him ever so slightly for the VC, considering his good, favourable scoring history against the Pies in recent games. They don't tag. That was the other thing as well, which kind of went towards Merritt's favour as opposed to Dacos. And as it turned out, for those people that put the VC on Merritt, they were rewarded very, very nicely. Sammy Walsh, 69, dinner for 2, ding, ding. Not even though it's obviously a number that we harp on about is a bit of a gag. It's not one you really want to see, especially from a primo of Walsh's ilk. He's dropped down from a 148 the previous round against Richmond to 69 against the Giants. So not good at all. So hopefully he can turn that form around. But I think he did have a run with, Bedford had a run with roll on Walsh, which sort of quelled his influence. So that was annoying to see as an owner and as a fellow bagger as well, of course. Tookie Miller, spoke about him, subbed off, I think it was around about the second quarter on 33 with that wrist injury. Fingers crossed that he is totally fine and it's just a knock, no breaks, no fractures, all that sort of stuff. Rawlinson, who is my non-playing player from West Coast, I brought him on field to loop on McKerch's score of 134, who was my emergency. Was very, very pleased with that. And I rolled the dice with benching Tom Green, which in this case worked well because I ended up netting an extra 38 points by playing McKerch over Tom Green. So a bit of an anti-pod there by not fielding Tom Green and putting on the pod in McKerch. Bo Dowling, I always do this. What's his name? I forget his first name. Billy Dowling, of course, 67. A bit annoying because, I didn't really need to utilise it, but would have been good. The swing between Revel, if I needed to. It would have really hurt me if I didn't go for Rankine, Fisher for Rankine, because I would have had to have relied on either Revel or Dowling. Dowling scored 67 compared to Revel's 36. And of course, moving into the forward line, we'll jump back to the rucks in a moment, but a bit of a segue here. So Richards was my emergency with that 34. And as it turned out, I was using this game as a bit of a tester because if Richards scored half decently, I would have kept Fisher and not brought in Rankine. And I would have obviously used Fisher as my loophole for Richards to score. So Richards, I'm going to partly blame you, mate, for not putting up a big score, which then I guess allowed me to bring in Rankine for Fisher because looking at Richard's score, I was like, you know what? I don't think Revel's going to score well. Didn't think Dowling was going to score well either as a bit of a plug and play for Fisher being out. So that's that. For the remainder of the forwards, Flanders 104, another captaincy option that failed. Heaney 127, Zorko another captaincy option, which some people were considering, 84, that failed. Rankine 97 by all accounts. He actually salvaged quite a score, but again, probably the number one absolute nonce for rubbing himself out potentially for multiple weeks. Luke Jackson 121. Now, Jacko is... And we had a few messages as well, people sliding into our DMs saying, who should I trade out of Jackson or Fisher? And it's like, well, it comes down to your risk profile. I think with Jackson, I've just been resigned to keeping him despite those low scores on two counts. First and foremost is that he allows that ruck forward DPP swing with Kruger at R3 if I need to have a bit of ruck cover for English or Gawn. And the other reason was the fact that Darcy is made of glass and he's going to get injured at some stage or another. As it turned out, I think he was subbed off with concussion. So it turns out that he, to that point of when Darcy was subbed out, I think he was on around about 60 odd thereabouts, nothing too crash hot. And then he just absolutely flew home as a number one ruck, as we've seen it time and again that he can do with the 121. So he's going to get the number one ruck mantle again in round 18, considering that Darcy's going to be out for concussion. So he comes up against Hawthorn and Meek, who he's got half-decent scoring history against, 78, 126 and a 101. So fingers crossed for those of you that did keep him and didn't trade him, you're going to be rewarded. So yeah, again, highly owned player. That's the thing as well, that if you want to create a bit of a point of difference in your team, yes, you can get rid of these highly owned players for alternatives that are perhaps lesser owned. But as I said, with Jackson, for those people that slid into my DMs, I was like, it's totally up to you. I don't want to put you down a path. But for me, I was getting rid of Fisher because I did think, I was just making the guesstimation that McKerch was going to impact Fisher now that McKerch is back. So otherwise, I probably would have kept Fisher. That's the thing. So, yeah, that's totally up to you what you wanted to do. But Charlie Curnow was the other low point for me. Wasn't even injured, but was able to score exactly the same as Tookie Miller, 33. Now, the thing with this is that it's not danger signs as yet. Yes, I know he's like on field. He's an F6. Key position forward, we know. We've seen this time and again. But the way that he's been played, or I guess nullified, the previous couple of weeks against Richmond, I spoke about it last week. Richmond were virtually flooding Carlton's forward line just to block up space and really, I guess, multiple team, not double team, not triple team. It was like a multiple team defense where they just blocked up space, and Carlton didn't have any avenue to kick into leading forwards because there was no space. And then they were just bombing high bombs and onto the heads of Charlie and Harry Mackay as well. So, they were kind of nullified until the game opened up late in the game. That game, on the weekend against the Giants, same sort of thing, except this time Charlie was being double teamed. Every opportunity when, he's kicked the ball, and again, the entry was absolutely putrid, kicking high up and unders, all that sort of stuff where, you got 2 against 1, you got absolutely no hope. They're going to be spoiling, they're going to be marking over you. And it was frustrating to see because, I've seen it, and I can attest to this being obviously a Carlton man, but early rounds of the season where Carlton's been challenged by the opposition, Voss and co have actually thrown Curnow back to stem the flow and really wrestle the momentum back into our favour by using him as a marking, a floating marking tool in defence. I guess that third man back, I guess you could probably say. So, it's happened multiple times in the season. I think it was Adelaide, it happened. It would have been the home games. The Giants, I can remember him going back as well, back at round 6. And then this time around, like Melbourne was another one as well. It was a big game against the D's round 9. He was thrown back, scored well enough, 108. And they didn't even think of using that tactic, which really perplexes me because at that stage of the game when Carlton was being done, the Giants were just able to effortlessly move the ball into their forward half, whereas we just had so much trouble getting our hands on the ball, let alone moving it into our forward 50 or forward half of the ground, where Charlie was just standing there. And I'm like, if you've got him there, throw him back. Like, what are you doing? But anyway, I could go on about that for days. Ended up scoring a 33. And I know there has been some suggestions that maybe he's carrying that. I think it was an ankle injury that he was subbed off with, I don't think he was subbed off against North Melbourne, it might have been. Was it North? Who was it? I can't recall who it was. Or was it Gold Coast? It may have been Gold Coast. It was a Marvel game. And he finished the game on the bench, and the game was well done and dusted. So, yeah. So I don't know if he's carrying something, but he's still playing multiple minutes. He's playing maximum minutes. So I don't think that would be the case. I just think it's the way the opposition are quelling him. This week he faces Western Bulldogs. Probably helps that Liam Jones is out and they're a little bit undersized. They've got Norton who's out in their forward 50. They may have to throw an extra tall forward like a lob instead of having lob back in defence. I'm just hoping that this is the week that he can come back and score well. Like previous 3 games against the Dogs, 154, 113 and an 85. So I am not too concerned as yet. But I do think if you have an option for looping him, or at least having an option alternative on the bench that you can loop the score on, and then I guess take Charlie off field for, if you have any swings, then that's definitely something I would do. If you've got a Caldwell, for example, in the midfield, you can swing to the forward line. Anyone that's playing early, really. He wouldn't be able to do... Oh, you could probably do it, yeah. You could put Charlie on the bench because Carlton played before Essendon and Screeney score. And then if he scores shit again, then you obviously play Caldwell or... Caldwell you probably play on field anyway, but just using him as an example. But, that's probably something I'd be looking to do if you have the potential and capacity in terms of trades to do it. But aside from that, let's round things out. So on the bench, Revel, 36, spoke about him. Disappointing. Probably, I think, his lowest score for the season. And I think that's all but dried up his cash-making potential now. He's gone up to 11.3k. It's his lowest score for the season. So it is what it is. Probably getting less time in the midfield as well with Ashcroft back, where he was getting a few... little nibbles in the engine room. Joe Richards as well, 34, spoke of him. Looked okay in patches, but was turning it over, which really did hurt his score. Hopefully he can keep his spot in the side. I think he probably will. Myercheck's gone down, so there's another forward option that they really need to try and cover. Darcy Cameron underdone, I think as well. He had rib injury, so Kruger may spend time forward, and the likes of Joe Richards as well might be playing that I guess sidekick role up forward. And then rounding things out as well in the ruck line, Gawn with 100. He was subbed out of the game late. I mean, the game was one and done. He was probably going to walk in a 120, 130 plus score. So for those people that put the captaincy on him, helped me in a sense because I obviously put the captaincy on Sarong, only missed out on a 16-point difference there. And then we have Tim English as well, 137 to his credit. We joked about it, Liam and I. Had a good matchup against Sweet. Port have been giving away quite a number of points to opposition ruckmen, and it was a good matchup, and English finally made the most of it, 137 in his kit bag. So he faces Carlton, big, tough assignment here with TDK. Be interesting to see if Pitney comes in because TDK was run ragged physically against a big-bodied Briggs, but around the ground, I reckon TDK is going to absolutely towel up English. So it might actually work into his favour if he goes up against more of a stationary, slow, big-bodied Pitney. So we'll see what happens there, and fingers crossed. Going forward, and Kruger 63. So if you're able to use Kruger on the forward line as a bit of a cover for Fisher, you wouldn't be too unhappy with that. But I imagine a lot of people would probably roll the dice on a Revel or a Dowling or the like. So, yep, hopefully it worked out in your favour. So from here on out, ladies and gents, I think we need to sort of address the elephant in the room here. Obviously, 2 trades remaining, not ideal. We've got 7 rounds to go. I think even if, like, there's 3 options here? 4 options, baby. Rankine gets off, not suspended, which I think is going to be very, very surprising unless they Adelaide end up hiring the QC, the lawyer from Carlton that got Cripps off that possible suspension last year or the year before, rather. And then is Miller not missing any weeks whatsoever. It was just a knock to his wrist. It was precautionary, but he's fine. That would be obviously ideal. The other option is Rankine gets suspended for maybe 1-2 weeks. I think 1 to 2 weeks, I will definitely hold Rankine. 3 weeks or more is the 3-week mark is kind of pushing it. 4 weeks plus, that's definitely got to be a trade. That's, as I said, he's going to be missing for more than half of the season remaining. So I'm crossing my fingers that it's 1 to 2, 3 at most. But we'll have to see in terms of cover as to what we can do. Because it may work in our favour now that we've brought in McKerch early, that we can maybe move on a Tookie Miller. If Miller is out, that's the other option as well. Miller's out for the rest of the season or for 4+ weeks, which again is the same as Rankine. I'm going to have to move him on. And then the other option is Rankine gets done for 4+ weeks and Miller's out for the season, which is going to be absolute, just an absolute shit of a thing, really. No other way to put it, because it means that we're going to have to virtually use the 2 trades, or we definitely use a trade on Miller and then try and keep our last trade for as long as possible. And the player that we bring in for Miller, we shift forward. Hopefully it's a Caldwell or someone that we can afford. And we'll look to do that move, and then Caldwell can go forward to sort of cover for Rankine via Revel DPP. So with that, ladies and gents, we can't really make a definitive call as yet. So might check back in with this on the Thursday live stream. So make sure to, of course, tune into that on YouTube. As I said, normally starts around about 6 o'clock, ready for team sheets to drop around about 6:20, 6:25. So yeah, I'll make more of a definitive call then when team sheets are released. And I know definitively what's happening with Rankine and what's happening with the running man, Tookie Miller. Not ideal to be in this position, but I tried something last week and, it's worked out for the 1 week, and it's just bad luck, really. You can't control these things where it's an injury related or suspension. So there's no use kicking yourself, really. So the same applies to anyone tuning in at the moment. If you've brought in Rankine, and, you were deciding to trade out a Took Miller or someone else and you've kept Took Miller, it is what it is. It's just the shit part of the game where sometimes it works in your favour, other times it doesn't. And a lot of the time, I think I don't know if it's key learnings this year, and it was kind of last year as well, holding your trades for as long as you can. I saw the opportunity, I think, after a down week for me. I was a little bit susceptible psychologically. I was like, you know what, I'm sick of this. I need to make moves. where I probably should have made the one move, and then maybe, I did have the option of doing it where I was going to reverse, having seen Miller get injured and subbed early in Saturday, or thereabouts, whatever it was, and then I could have reversed the trade with Rankine to Steele, and then swung Dowling forward. Now that would have put me in a better position. I would have had to have obviously bench Steele, so would have been useless in terms of scoring wise, but would have meant that I would have played Dowling potentially. Who knows? Because I could have played Revel then as well. So I may be worse off for the round score, but I mean obviously better off by keeping Steele and trading Miller if I need to. So anyway, there's no use dwelling on it. So I guess let's roll through some ramifications. So I think that Rankine's going to be out for 1 to 2, if not 3 maximum. So we'll have to try and keep him. So we're going to have to try and rely upon trading Took, if he's out for extended period for the remainder of the year or whatever, to a DPP player. And it's the player that I was thinking of getting apart from Rankine, of course, and it is Caldwell. It does mean that Green comes on field and obviously McKerch as well. So that DPP swing that I was looking to use in that 23rd man with McKerch, it's come in handy for the moment anyway. So we've seen just the one game sample size of McKerch returning, but I've loved what I've seen, and just an absolute gun. So let's see if we can do this. I haven't tried this as yet as well. So I'm praying to the gods that the pricing fluctuations have been kind, that I can afford to trade Took Miller to Caldwell. So let's see how we go. I hate this. So 554 we have to play with. Yes, we can afford it. Thank you, SuperCoach gods. So I can afford to go Miller to Caldwell. That'll leave me with only 10.2k in the bank for my last trade. It is what it is. I think at this point, in terms of guys to go for, I need to go for a player that's either a forward only or a DPP player that has forward eligibility in order to cover Rankine. So it's not the end of the world. I think considering this, I could probably push it with Rankine being out for 4 weeks. But if it gets to a stage where I have another player that's copped a suspension or an injury, knock on wood, that it doesn't happen, and they're out for the remainder of the year, I'm going to have to pull the trigger on my last trade. So this is part of the reason. Caldwell's a bit of an out. It's a bit of a, break glass in case of emergency type scenario. But I guess the one thing that it does allow me to do is the DPP swings as well. So it opens things up a little bit more as well, adds that extra option as well if I need to use it, where I can swing Caldwell back into the midfield if Rankine's only out for a couple of weeks. I say, optimistically, and then go from there. And then for the remainder of the year, Caldwell and or McKerch or Rosie or Green, all these guys could be 23rd men that will give me, or hopefully give me, a little bit of a leg up over the rest of the competition and in head-to-head league matches as well. And then, as I said, with McKerch being their defender midfield option, I can swing him with Nicky Martin as well. Not ideal, but that's kind of the option. So if we were to go down this route, I mean, other options you could look at, Trent Rivers, but not going to work in my case, obviously, because I need someone on the forward line. And Trent Rivers, while scoring well, and probably should have scored just as well last week because he's getting ample mid-time. For his price point, he's good value if you're looking for someone in defence. Doesn't suit my needs, unfortunately, because obviously need to cover Rankine. But having said all that, I think Caldwell, spoke about him in the the episode during the week with Liam, and there's a little bit of a risk there with Parrish potentially coming back. They may, by the time he comes back, I think he's still listed as 2 to 3 weeks, maybe, potentially. So by the time he returns in 3 weeks' time, 19, 20, 21, there's another 3 weeks to go. He may take 3 weeks to really get his fitness base back anyway, with Parrish, because he's obviously got a lower leg injury, and he's going to take a bit of time to get back into the swing of things. So I think Caldwell's going to provide a bit of security there. He's going to get ample mid-time, and so on and so forth. So let's see if DFS Australia has actually updated their data in the back end just to see CBAs for Caldwell. Let's have a quick squeeze. Yes, they have, thankfully. Geez, check out, if you haven't already, DFS Australia, incredible stuff. Caldwell, he had 79%. So in his past 4 weeks, he's had 54, 75, 90%, and 79%. Took a little bit of a hit compared to the previous week when he had 90%, mainly due to Shield. And Liam spoke about this in the weekly episode as well, where the potential return of Shield was going to have a bit of an impact on the likes of Caldwell, Perkins and the like, which as you can see there, Perkins dropped from 41% to 25%, and even Durham as well, from 62% to 43%. So yeah, interesting times. And Merritt as well. I mean, his past 3 games, he had 64%, 69%, and 68%. Prior to that, he had 88, 84, 86, 88, 90, and 100% CBAs. So he's dropped in order to accommodate, to bring in the likes of Caldwell, and now even Shield as well. But, I mean, if Merritt's still busting out 140 plus scores with reduced CBAs, we are all for it, of course. So that's kind of the way things sit at the moment. So if we were to complete this trade, we'll do it preemptively, but we will reverse it, of course, in hope that Tookie is not out. But even if he's not out, I'm kind of in the mindset now that if I don't go for Caldwell now, I'm not going to have a chance to get him in. And aside from that, if Took's not out and Rankine's out, suspended, I'm not confident, obviously, in having a Revel cover for Rankine. Not ideal either because of the fact that, as you'll see here, if I was to swing Revel into the forward line, Caldwell into the forward line via Revel, and then bench Rankine, the only loophole option that I have is Joe Richards from the Pies. Because, yeah, virtually he's my only option to loop. Like, ideally, this would be the game plan that I'd be going with as well if Rankine didn't get himself reported and potentially suspended, where I'd have Caldwell swinging between midfield and the forward line, mainly due to the fact that I'd love to, screen Curnow's scores, get a little bit of a look on my bench as the emergency, and then if he scores shit, play a Caldwell, which would be the ideal way to play it. Just with Curnow as well, I think his ownership is gone up a little bit again. Actually, no, it stayed the same from the previous week. So 16.3% last week and this week. So he is still a relative pod in comparison to obviously Jackson, Zorko, Heaney, Flanders. Even Caldwell's numbers would have gone up as well because a lot of people would have traded Fisher to him directly. Yeah, he went from 6% ownership to 13.2% ownership. So, yeah, that's probably the other thing as well. Even though he's still 16.2, he's still a pod, Caldwell. So we can't really have, yes, he's been scoring well, but wouldn't you love the option to either, loop his score on or off, dependent upon how he's performing? And, much like I did there on the weekend with McKerch and Tom Green is highly owned. So that worked in my favour. Like 49% of teams had to gobble that score of 96 compared to McKerch, who I think is owned by a fair few, 19% of teams. So actually higher than what I thought. But obviously I get that edge with 19% ownership compared to Tom Green's 40%. So, or 49%, sorry. So, that's kind of how you make up a bit of point of difference there with potting, anti-potting, everything else. Lower ownership, high ownership, playing all off against each other. So yeah, going forward, this is what I may have to do, and just pray that Charlie's able to score well, or pray that Richards can score well enough for me to have confidence in playing and looping his score on field for Charlie Curnow. Jackson, of course, as I said, he's going to have the number 1 ruck mantle, so super happy with him. He's probably the other one that I would try and loop with if I wasn't looping Curnow. So yeah, that's virtually where I'm at, ladies and gents. Aside from that, I don't think I'll be making another trade. As I said, with Rankine, if I was to trade him, who could I trade him for? I mean, Dylan Moore. Again, keeping in mind this is the last trade, so I would really need to be confident in who I'm trading in. Fisher back into the team, I don't think so. So there's no one really in the forward line outside of those I've already got that would be worthy of coming in. I'm not going to bring another key forward in Cameron, but he's scoring well. It could even be a would disable a swing, but Nick Martin into the midfield, and then bringing in Trent Rivers as a bit of a pod as well. That could be another option. But let's have a look in the midfield. Actually, just out of interest, who could I afford? 579.7. Wouldn't be able to afford Dunkley, Neil. I could afford Treloar, who again busted out that 129. So he could be an option. He's a relative pod as well. 2.5% of teams. Has a break even of 142 as well. So yeah, he's someone that I'll probably look at. Cripper's another one. Back-to-back scores of 144. Just really motoring along. Really nice fixture as well for the run home. The likes of North Melbourne, Collingwood, Hawthorn, West Coast, St Kilda, who he scores, I think, the most against. He averages the most against of any side. So there's him. There's wouldn't be able to afford Goulden. LDU, no. Anderson, I don't trust. Steele, I just traded out. Rail, definitely no. I could afford a Rory Laird, but not a fan. Andy Brayshaw's coming into some form. Max Holmes had a little bit of a down game. Could afford him if I wanted to. Jordan Dawson's dropped another 35.5k. Gee whiz, I'm glad I didn't actually get him into my team way back when. I remember I was deciding between him and Walshy. And as it turned out, probably even, I reckon, now, both of these guys. But yeah, I mean, Hayden Young, he's very up and down. Yeah, there's no one else that I'd be keen on in my team. So we're going to try and hold this trade for as long as we can, if we need to use the other one. So that's pretty much where we're at, ladies and gents. So if we were to put the, let's just very quickly go through the C and VC options as well. Sorry, sounded like a bit of a skipping record then. So Collingwood and Geelong, Dacos is potentially one for a bit of a bounce back. The Cats haven't utilised a run with player for a few weeks now without O'Connor, who was out of the side. And he's at a pretty high floor, aside from the 92 on the weekend and a 64 against the Ds when he got tagged and subbed. He's been scoring 116, 129, 156, 130, 105, 147, 150, 128, 133, and so on and so forth. So if you're looking for, a VC with a high floor, look no further. Dacos is a very proud player, of course, as well. You'll probably want to bounce back. Likewise, the Pies as well as an outfit. Hawthorn, Freo, you could go for Luke Ryan potentially. You could go for Sarong. Hopefully he's not tagged, and the Hawks weren't watching that game on the weekend, but yeah, a little bit of a risk. Sydney against North, you could go for Goulden. Heaney's another one, probably a popular one against North, in Sydney, of course, as well. He's passed three, scored 131, 121, and 83. Who else is there? Dogs against Carlton. No, I wouldn't be confident. I mean, Bont. I think Bont scores well against us normally. 155, 105, and a 112. Yes, potentially. Bit of a backs against the wall game as well for the Dogs against Carlton. Hopefully they don't get up and win. Adelaide against St Kilda. There's no one that I've got. Relevance. Melbourne against Essendon. Gawn, maybe. Depends if Goldstein comes back or if they stick with Draper, which they probably should as the number one ruck. 121, 103, and a 117 in his past three against the Dons. Don't mind Gawney, averaging 115 against the Dons in 8 games. Merritt, off his big score. What is he average against the Ds? 119, 147, and a 134, if you don't mind. Wow. I wonder if they utilise a Neil Bullen or someone to execute a bit of a run with Roll. He's past 4 games. He's gone 125, 135, a 78 against the Cats, and then 145. So, yeah, he's in some pretty good form, bar that game against the Cats. Caldwell, I wouldn't have confidence in as yet. Gold Coast against Port. Could you go Butters against Gold Coast? Slippery conditions on the Gold Coast. 76, 42, and 81 he averages against the Suns, does Butters, so no. Rosie coming off the big score as well. scoring a 94, 113 and a 95 in his past 3 against the Suns. No. Richmond against the Giants. Could you go Tom Green? Or do they try and tag him? That's the thing. They use bloody Graham, big body Graham against Sarong. He would be a good matchup for Tom Green as well, so probably not. And West Coast against the Lions. If you obviously got Zorko, if you've got Neil, if you've got Dunkley, all good options. Zorko in his past 3, 109, 123 and a 63, but obviously those weren't the defensive games. So yeah, that's virtually it. But I think, I don't know who I'd choose at this stage. So make sure to tune in to our weekly episode. Liam and I will run through in our course, our famous segment, I Am the Captain Now. And we'll roll out the red carpet for those top options. But outside of that, let's just undo changes here and I guess try and materialize the into fruition, into reality, that Miller doesn't get injured and Rankine isn't out for an extended period through suspension. So we will cross our fingers. In the meantime, let us take Green on field and we'll put the emergency still on McKerch if you wanted to loop him. Yeah, in terms of loops and stuff, as I said, Richards would probably be the one that I'm looping with Rankine if need be, or at the very least, if I bring in Caldwell, put him forward and he'd be my loop for Charlie Curnow. But backing in Charles for a bit of a bounce back game. And yeah, cross our fingers that our team overall can bounce back and we're not handed any more bad luck, really. It's becoming a bit of a joke. But anyway, ladies and gents, that is us for round 17. Of course, if you have any comments, questions, feel free to leave them down below here on YouTube if you are watching us via this platform. Otherwise, if you are tuning in via the audio podcast, of course, you can still hit us up on Twitter. Of course, just search at supercoach_edge. And you can find myself at DamoJ88 as well. And hit up Liam and I through the main podcast Twitter, and we are always happy to help where we can. Of course, if you have enjoyed me going through the comprehensive look into my team, everything else, and I guess all the other content that we put out from week to week, team sheets live stream on Thursdays, of course, make sure to tune into that. Everything else, weekly episodes, feel free to give us a like, give us a sub, all that sort of stuff, and we will thank you with a tip of the cap, a wink, and a handshake, a virtual handshake, of course. But aside from that, ladies and gents, make sure to tune in to our weekly episode and, of course, the live stream, as I said, on Thursday. But until then, we will catch you in the next one. Cheers. Hope you had a good weekend. See you next time.